Now we're going to talk about 2-point perspective. So 1-point perspective, height and width are parallel to the picture plane, to the top and bottom and the sides. 2-point perspective now, the only dimension that's going to stay parallel to the picture plane is the height. The width and the depth are going to vanish to vanishing points on the eye level line. Okay, so let's take our cube here. And right now, I've got it sitting flat on the paper, and you can just see the front of it. If I drop it down, you'll start to see the top of it. As I drop it down, you'll see more and more of the top. And if I go up, at some point you'll start to see the bottom of it. Watch what happens when I now turn that cube. It's a little hard to do, but if I turn it, notice how you see the face on the front turns to the left, and as it turns, it appears to get shorter. So that is being foreshortened. To my turn, now see right there, you see about equal sides, but if I keep turning, you'll see less of this side and more of the front. There we go. So that's what we want to try to replicate, is somewhere in between. So you're not just looking at one face, but two. And again, you'll have a top or bottom, depending on where you place the cube, either above or below the eye level line. Now, 2-point perspective is trickier than 1-point perspective. Okay, if you think of 1-point perspective, there's only one point. In general, you're going to see, you could plot where that point is because it'll be close to the box. You'll only see one point. Those diagonal lines, those receding lines, are going to have to meet somewhere very, very close to the box on the eye level line. 2-point perspective is a whole other thing, because now you're dealing with points that are going to be quite far apart from each other. Again, looking at this cube, trying to keep it level. If you look at one side, you see more of it. That means that side, the vanishing point, is going to be very far away, and the side where you see less of it is going to be closer in. But they're always going to be very far apart from each other. So this is always tricky for people, because you generally are not going to see both the vanishing points on your paper. When we practice this, sometimes I have you put them both on the paper, just so you understand how the lines vanish to them. But optically, it sometimes creates distortion. So we want to be careful of that. I've created another eye level line on my paper. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some vanishing points all the way at the ends of my paper, as far apart as I possibly can. And I'm going to make fairly small boxes. If I make a really big box, you'll see the distortion. I'm going to make some smaller boxes. Now again, you can have multiple vanishing points within one drawing, but we'll get there later. Okay, right now, let's just get the basics down. So I'm going to use just one edge of my cube. Now make sure that's, one thing I want to do right away is check and make sure that it's actually a vertical line, which it wasn't. But I wanted to get that basic size there. So I'm making the same size of box. Just erase that extra line out there. Oops. I'm going to switch to my my HB. So my 4B. Here's my HB, or my 2B. So there's my height line. Where my height lines in 2-point perspective are going to be vertical. The rest of my lines, however, are going to recede to vanishing points. So now I'm going to draw lines that go from the top and bottom of this line to the left vanishing point. And I'm just going to label that BP1, or left, however you want to label it. And then this one over here is VP right. So those two vanishing points are the only two vanishing points I'm using. It's because it's 2-point perspective. Sometimes you can't plot the line all the way out to the vanishing point. So you can see why 2-point perspective is a little more tricky than 1-point. So here's my lines. The next thing I need to do is figure out my back line. Now, this is one of those things where I could just make any old box I want, and I kind of don't expect you to really be excellent at cubes right from the start, but I'm going to try to make this cubish. So the thing about this is, because this is receding in space, I'm not going to see the line going back this way is not going to be the same length as this line, even though I know my cube is, all of these lines are exactly the same length. But because of that diminution, right, because objects appear to get smaller as they go back in space, that is going to create a shorter plane here and here. This line is almost right in the middle, so both of these sides are going to be about the same in terms of their width this way. So they're slightly foreshortened. And again, use a ruler. I like to draw freehand, but I'm going to use a ruler because if you're not precise enough in perspective, what will happen is things will get off a little bit, and then it'll just compound. So I'm going to just draw another pipeline right there. So I've got my back lines now, the lines that define the back of my box. Notice how I have what's called an obtuse triangle or angle right here. That is more than 90 degrees, and it's flattening out. Can you see as it's getting towards the eye level line, this line is starting to flatten out more than the bottom line. Okay, now this is where a lot of times people run into problems. What do you do with these back lines? This is where people do this. They'll draw a line that goes like that. Because what we know is that the top of the cube has all this depth to it, right? But we don't see it. We know it, we don't see it. So this is where we have to trust our eyes and not our minds. That isn't going to work. Well, it's not going to a vanishing point. Every line that is not a vertical has to go to one or the other of these vanishing points. So let's just take that out. This has to go back over here. This drives people nuts. It doesn't seem logical, but it is. That's the point. It is logical. It just doesn't fit with our knowledge of the object. Now see how flat the top of that box looks, but that's accurate. Give it a little bit more of a heavy outline there. I'm going to make this a see-through box. So I'm going to draw lines from the bottom of the box also up to that vanishing point. And then I've given myself a little bit of a problem here with that line that I made first. The back line of the box is going to be right about there. So there's my cube. Once I draw it, it looks right. But our brains are going to tell us it's not. We have to really focus. So very, very important point here is that there's only 3 places that these lines can go. in this drawing of the cube. One is vertical height lines. One goes to one vanishing point. You could say that's width or depth. It doesn't really matter at this point which one you say goes where. Or the other vanishing point, and that's it. There's no other lines going anywhere when you're drawing this cube. If you were drawing a house with a little peaked roof, yes, you could have lines going in other directions, but we're not doing that. We're just drawing a cube. Okay, cube number one. So let's see what happens when we draw a cube that's closer to the eye level line. So I'm just going to erase out some of these receding lines here. And once again, just take a measurement. Here's about 2 inches. So now I'm going to come right in here and make it very close to the eye level line. Okay. So there's my, what I call the leading edge of the box, one that's closest to you, right? This edge right here. Now, I'm fortunate that I have this nice long T-square, so I can use that to plot my lines. But I'm actually not going to use it because you probably don't have one. So I'm going to just use my ruler, and I'll show you how you can do this. Sometimes your ruler won't reach all the way to the vanishing point. So I'm drawing those lines to the vanishing point from the top and bottom of the leading edge of my cube. Okay? And actually, my ruler does reach, but sometimes what will happen is you just have to kind of aim your ruler at that point. It's best if you don't have to do that, but sometimes you do. So now, whoops, that line didn't really come out. Probably my pencil needs sharpening. Now don't worry if you're drawing right through this box here. You know, when you draw, don't worry about that. You can always shade or erase or something. Better to just draw the line. Now, this box is going to be closer to the left vanishing point. What that means is that we're going to see more of the side that's going towards the right vanishing point and less of the side that's going to the left vanishing point. So this is one of those things where, remember when we looked at our cube and we turned it, that as it turns like this, that vanishing point is going to come closer in. So the closer the vanishing point is to a side, the less you see of that side, the more foreshortened that side will be. So this side here is going to be wider, not completely 2 inches, but wider. And this side is going to be narrower. Again, I'm going to check my work here. I like the see-through ruler because I can really see that I'm making a nice vertical line here. Just right up to here. And I made that a little too high right there because this comes up to that receding line. And then the tricky part, okay? This is where I have to draw a line back from this point. Now my ruler isn't quite going to be long enough, but that's okay. It's close enough. I can aim that at the vanishing point there. I'm going to draw that line. And then from that point to that vanishing point, look how narrow that top is. Oh, it's so narrow. You can barely see anything there. That's because it's close to the eye level line. Let me just pick up a hard or softer pencil, and I'm going to just go over that outline. I'll probably use my ruler here because it's so thin. So I'm just outlining this a little bit darker. So that you can see the box a little more clearly. Make sure that's really parallel. Now that back line is tricky. Let me get this edge right here. That back line is really tricky. It's so flat, I can barely see it. And I made that just a little too high there. So when things get really narrow like that, it can be very difficult to see. So 2-point perspective adds in a whole new set of variables. Not only do you have the eye level line and how that affects how you see the cube, you also have vanishing points that affect how you see the cube. So just to reiterate, as the cube gets close to the eye level line, moving up, you're going to see less and less of the top of that until you get to the eye level line. You won't see any of the top at that point. It'll just be a flat horizontal line. Same thing is true above the eye level line. If your cube is above the eye level line, you will see the bottom of it. And as it approaches the eye level line, that will flatten out. So the eye level line, if any flat surface like this, when it sits right on the eye level line, it'll just be a flat line. Same thing with the vanishing points. As the cube gets closer to either of the vanishing points, that side of the box will become so foreshortened that at a certain point you won't see anything but the edge of that side. At that point, you'll probably be in 1-point perspective because your vanishing point will be that close to your box. So you can see here, right in the middle, I can see about equal sides of the box. Getting closer to one or the other of the vanishing points, I'll see less of the side that's closest to the vanishing point, more of the side that's furthest from the vanishing point. Okay, so that's a real quick introduction to 1- and 2-point perspective. And we're going to be practicing these. I have decided in my infinite wisdom that it's really important to understand the principles of perspective before we really move on, because this, again, if you can embody these things, if you can actually really understand them and put them into practice so that you could draw a cube from your imagination, in a sense, that's a very important skill. I just drew 2 planes of a cube, and I'm not worried about the vanishing points or anything right now. I'm just using my knowledge. These lines have to converge. This set of 3 lines has to converge, and this set of 3 lines has to converge. If I drew those lines further out, you would see that they would eventually come together. Same thing with these lines. If I extended those lines out, they would eventually come together also. I just did that from my knowledge, right? I didn't plot that, but it takes practice to be able to do that. And once you can do that, then you can start thinking about all of the different things that you could build inside of that cube. More complex forms, just like in that video of Kim Jong-ji. He knows how to do that. And I want you to know how to do that too, but it's going to take some practice. Okay,